Are you in love or are you in control? Are you being loved or goodness, or are you being controlled? That's what I want to talk about on this Sunday, on this hike. Do you see the deer over there? They see me. They're like, what is she doing? So happy Sunday. I wanted to talk about love and control because oftentimes we mix them up. We get them confused. We think that when we are loving someone or actually controlling someone, that we're loving them. And I want to talk about this intelligent mechanism at play in all dynamics, in all relationships. So let's have a seat here and let's chat about love and control. Because once you see this intelligent mechanism, you can't unsee it. And this will change your life. This will change how you look at love, look at relationship, look at familial dynamics, romantic dynamics, even your relationship with yourself and all the things. So, it's interesting. I think that I had to really unravel this thing. And why? Maybe I should scoot over so we can see the front range over there. Someone's coming. But this idea that that felt unsettling to me in a lot of my relationships. And once you recognize what is at play here, the structure collapses and you can then choose to live on the other side of what's at play, this intelligent mechanism. And so oftentimes we assign people roles, right? And we reduce their humanity into this role. And instead of recognizing that they're a whole person, like a whole soul, and hello, that they're a whole soul with dreams, desires, emotions that matter to them. But in this structure that we sometimes call the patriarchy, this hierarchy type of structure, you are reduced to just the role. You are reduced to not having feelings or desires that matter, just the role. And so, it's interesting because I was having this conversation with my kids, and as they get older, their role is changing in my life. It is not this parent-child relationship where I'm going to keep them stuck and small in this childlike role, because that's not, as a not even a parent, but like as a human being, that's not me honoring their humanity, their greatness, their bigness. That's can't be reduced into a role. It cannot. And so I was having a conversation because I'm trying to get them to understand that they are bigger than this role. Because when you reduce someone to a role, it does not allow them to grow, evolve, expand, become bigger. It only keeps them small. It only keeps them dependent. And it all unraveled for me because I was reading this book on business. And, by the way, OmniRead.ai launches February 2nd, 2/2. I'm really excited about that. I will be sharing more about that app later. But it's a wonderful app. I'm excited about it. If you are a wisdom seeker, you like to look at life from these different lenses, this is going to be an app that you will want to utilize every single day. But anyways, I digress. But I was reading this book on entrepreneurship and business, and one of the things, because the point of the book is about freedom, liberation. And oftentimes people get into business desiring freedom, thinking that that's what they're going to get, only to realize that they are in their own prison. They've built their own job, and they own their own job, and they've built their own prison. And one of the lines in that book was, because people want to control their employees or control the business, and so they create dependency and not competency. Now, competency is where the power is, but oftentimes this control comes in is because we create dependency. And you see this in every relationship, whether it be a romantic marriage, partnership, parent, child, government, citizen. When you create dependency, this is you controlling the structure. You are maintaining the structure instead of empowering people with competency, because that would create freedom. The structure would collapse. And in my relationships, and I say that plural, I did find myself in this pattern that kept showing up, and I'm like, why does this not feel right? Why do I feel trapped? Why do I feel small? Why do I feel like my humanity as a woman, as a person, is never being honored, respected, or anything like that? And I kept finding myself in these kind of situations where I would be reduced to a role. And if I'm reduced to a certain role, then of course my whole being, because I'm not being recognized as whole, I'm being recognized as just the role. And it's interesting because I've been aligned with the military for a while, whether I was a spouse or a dependent child. And it's interesting, in the military, they wear uniforms, and they're very uniform. They wear their actual role on their sleeve. And then when you see people that outside of that role, and you see how they dress, and you see how they live, and you're like, wow, I didn't realize that you were bigger than that role. And it's sometimes shocking. You're like, wow, I didn't know that you live like this or you dress like this. And then you start seeing them differently. You start seeing them more whole, because the only experience you had of that person, the only perspective, was that reduction of that role. And that's it. And when you honor someone's wholeness, their sovereignty, their power, then things shift. Your role shifts. Hi. And that's often why people maintain these structures, because without the structure, what is my role in your life? So I want to keep you dependent enough on me to maintain this hierarchy where it's like parent-child, you're beneath me, this inferior, superior type of thing. So I create dependence. And then this is where you hear people say, especially men, really, I don't feel like I can do anything. People want to do things for people to demonstrate their value in their life, to keep them dependent enough so it maintains this structure, versus honoring someone's humanity, their soul, their desires, their feelings, their emotions that go beyond the role. And you often see this in familial dynamics because, as a parent myself, the role that with my children is changing. I can keep them dependent on me where, they can't do, like, they don't build a confidence in themselves to make the right decisions, or they can't think for themselves, or they can't have their own opinions, or they can't have their own desires and goals for themselves. I can keep them dependent on me, but that's me doing them a disservice and not honoring who they choose to be. It's keeping this structure in place of this superior, inferior, parent-child dynamic instead of allowing it to grow and evolve. And I've seen this as a mother. People, like my children, have expectations because the structure is still in place of me being their slave. and I use that word because that's internally how I feel sometimes. But in these dynamics, it does create a more oppressor, slave, victim mentality. It does. The oppressor wants to maintain this superior inferior structure. They don't want you to know your power or empower you truly. And you see this with health systems. You see this with the government. If you're dependent and you don't empower yourself, then it maintains the structure. But once you see this mechanism at play, whether it's in a marriage, whether it's parent-child, whether it's the government, the citizen, once you see this mechanism, you can't unsee it. And so you start to be empowered. You start to recognize, oh, that's what's at play. It's this intelligent mechanism that sometimes we call narcissism that is keeping me stuck, that's keeping me small, that's keeping me disempowered. Okay? Keeping you disempowered. And so as a mother, I'm like, okay, I see this. Honestly, I don't want to maintain this structure. I don't want to keep doing stuff. It's exhausting for me. And I think a lot of mothers feel that way. I want to support my children in whatever it is they want for their lives. And it takes for me to pull back and allow them to become more confident in the decisions that they make, allow them to make their own decisions, allow them to figure things out. That's the loving thing. Because when we maintain the structure, this is about control. If I maintain the structure of money, finances, this doing of stuff for you and stuff, then I can control you. Instead of empowering people to be in their bigness, be their whole human. That didn't make sense, but be a whole human and honoring and respecting their wholeness. And so it goes both ways, right? It goes both ways. It goes, as a mom, empowering them to make their own decisions, giving them more responsibility, building their confidence, building their self-esteem, empowering them. And that means that I have to lovingly release control. Lovingly release control. And what often happens, though, is people will want to maintain the structure because they're like, who am I without the structure? Who am I to them? And so they maintain the structure and want to maintain this dependency, which in turn maintains the control because that speaks to their identity to that person. And so instead of them, the person maintaining the control, instead of them, being curious about who am I, they want to maintain this identity within that life. And so if someone, and this is where rebellion comes in, you see children rebelling and things like that. They're like, now who am I? Because children are very intuitive. They know that there's something off. They know that something's not right. And so they often rebel because they understand that this structure is about control. It's not truly about love, though we might think it is. Having someone doing stuff, but all this is unconscious typically. Sometimes doing stuff, doing too much for people, doing too much, trying to demonstrate and support your value in that person's life, it's all about control. Because true love is this liberation. It is freedom. It is sovereignty. It's not control. It's not reducing someone to a role in your life. This is the intelligent mechanism at play. We reduce them to this role instead of honoring and respecting their wholeness and their humanity and their soul. Right? So I wanted to share that. I wanted to talk about this thing because are you in love? Here we go again. Or are you in control? Are you being loved? Or are you being controlled? Recognize the mechanism at play here. And it's sad because it's unconscious because it's a pattern, it's programmed. And so we think that we're loving someone when we truly are just trying, we don't realize that we're just trying to control. We're trying to keep them dependent and reduce them to this role so I can maintain my role and my identity, and you need to stay in your role and in your identity. And so it makes me feel like the structure is still in place instead of freedom. The structure needs to collapse. This is where we talk about the patriarchy collapsing, is to collapse. And on a spiritual level, a more esoteric level, this is falling into the embrace of the feminine. Right? This is the dissolving of the ego, as they say. Because the ego is that structure. And the loving it with nourishment and witnessing and recognizing someone's humanity and seeing them for who they are, that's the loving, true loving. And so when that happens, the ego dissolves. The structure collapses. And that's true love. That's true love. So I wanted to share, once you see this intelligent mechanism at play, what we call narcissism, the patriarchy, you can't unsee it. It happens in all relational dynamics. So I encourage you to look at your life. Are there places in your life, whether it's with your child, your spouse, your parent, within a business even? That's where I started with this video, is the business. You're trying to have your employees dependent on you, but that's all about control. You're trying to control everything versus allowing them to gain that competency, empower them, which is going to ultimately lead to your freedom as well. So they become free and you become free. Anyways, you guys, it's cold. We got to keep moving. How long has it been? 20 minutes. Oh my God. Anyways, happy Sunday. And I will check you in the next video. Check out OmniRead. Launches February 2nd. And speaking of freedom in your business, we also launched BackOffice. I'm going to leave the link below for that, which also is another business tool that leads to more freedom in your business. If you can't tell, I'm all about freedom and liberation. And that's what all of this is about. If you can't tell, that's what all of this is about, is leading you to your sovereignty, your freedom, and your liberation. Anyways, I'll check you guys in the next one.